It was like on a Saturday night. Place is packed. After 2, after all, like the Chinatown scene with the Madame Wong's and Hong Kong Cafe, Saturday night. Places they just like closed their clubs. It was like, whew, come go to Atomic Café. As soon as the doors open, I could see X waiting for their table. They were right near the jukebox. At that time, Jerry Brown was dating Linda Ronstadt. And there was a window right behind them, and I see Andy Warhol kind of looking in. I see Sid Vicious with his entourage ordering like, I don't know how many different kinds of fried rice, and I see the fried rice being like thrown like we had a food fight. The middle table, either the Go-Go's were there or Devo was there. So there was a couple times where I had to chase a customer because they did a dine and dash. But when I went out, it looked like a freaking concert outside. We were the noisiest corner in J-Town.
Hi, and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our panel celebration of the Atomic Café and the world premiere of our film, Atomic Café, the noisiest corner in J-Town. Before we begin, I want to just say some thank yous and gratitudes first to Visual Communications and the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival for world premiering our film, which hopefully by now you have all had a chance to watch, and if not, it's still available. It's been a long time coming, and I think I can speak on behalf of all of us that we are thrilled to be sharing it with all of you finally. We also want to thank the Little Tokyo Service Center and the Japanese American National Museum for providing this space for our conversation and Q&A today. All these organizations are continuing to do programming despite the pandemic. We encourage you to check out their websites. I believe the links are available in the chat on YouTube. Please support, please get involved, please participate in continuing to be a part of the Little Tokyo community. So with that, my name is Remy De La Peza. I am one of the film's producers, and I will be moderating this amazing panel today. So I'd like to invite all the panelists to come on stage, the virtual stage, turn on your videos, and I'll go ahead and move into introductions of our panelists. Hey guys. So first, we have Nancy Sekizawa, also known as Atomic Nancy, owner of the Atomic Café, an early member of the seminal Asian American jazz group, Hiroshima, and someone who's been a long-time drug and alcohol counselor here in Los Angeles. Her daughter Zen is also joining us. Zen is a photographer, director, artist, and co-owner of Manoya, a custom object and furniture shop here in LA. Akira Boch is an Emmy award-winning filmmaker and director of the Watase Media Arts Center at the Japanese American National Museum. He co-directed the film you've seen hopefully by now with Tad Nakamura. And Tad is a homegrown 4th generation Japanese American documentary filmmaker, widely celebrated for his films about the Asian American and Japanese American experience. He is also an Emmy Award winner and directed and produced our film. So welcome all of you. Thank you for joining us. And I think we'll just jump right in. So I'd like to start with Nancy and Zen. In the film, we hear from a diverse set of voices, all of whom had very special experiences and memories of the Atomic Café. Nancy, maybe if you could start, why was the Atomic Café special to you? And what would you like us to know about the Atomic Café from your perspective?
Okay, just before the punk thing that happened, I gotta let you know, back in 1946, that's when Atomic Café first started, before the police station happened, where we were actually relocated to a different area of J-Town, but it started way back. And being that it was right after World War II, I think most of us were just really needing to get together and work as a community, right? So Atomic Café was one of those places, and it used to be open 24 hours, 7 days a week. So my parents really worked hard, just try to build back what they lost, you know, especially my dad who went to Manzanar. So my mom and both of them really worked hard. So it really is an important place. And when Atomic was moved over to the third location on First and Alameda, uh, you know, we were still very much a community based in J-Town, and we, you know, a lot of people, the shop owners would close, they would come over, they eat with us, and then in turn we would go over to their flower store or their hardware store, which Zen was one of them, and you know, we would just go ahead and just stay connected that way. And with the JA kids, you know, that used to go to these dances back in the 60s, right after the dances were over, they'd come over to Atomic and have a bowl of noodles, you know. But mainly it was very community based. There was, I got a memory of some of the local guys who used to fish, and they used to bring, like, you know, their catch of the day and bring it to my dad. My dad would cut it all up. I mean, it wasn't like a small little piece of sashimi. It was like a huge, big ass tuna. And, you know, they said, just spread it around whoever was there. And that's just how it was. A very, I would say, like, you know, just everybody needed to have some sort of fun. And my mom, I got to tell you about my mom. My mom was a good horse racer. She liked to go to the racetracks. And she had a lot of buddies that used to go there. And they would come back and they looked like, you know, they lost a lot of money and stuff. So, you know, with my mom, she was a giver. And she would just like say, and she had a tip can full of money, and she would just grab it and stick it in their pockets or their purses, you know. So we were supportive of each other that way. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Sounds very generous. It's such so much generosity. So yeah, Zen, I know you were still very young, but looking back on the Atomic, what was special about it to you?
Well, I feel like I was forced to be there, which I didn't like because I'd rather be with my friends playing. But I think once I got there, it was fun for me because I got to see my whole family in under one roof, which never really happens, even though, and they all had to pretend to get along, which is kind of nice. And you know, I got to stay up late and I got to hang out with a bunch of weirdos. So, you know, I think that was really fun for me. Super special, like thinking about like how I thought I was into cool music in the 6th grade, like Duran Duran or Boy George or something. And then I would come to the Atomic and I would listen to like the most hardcore punk all weekend. And yeah, I don't know, that was, you know, it's just a special place to think about, like, especially as an adult, like how wild it was. Yeah, but I don't know. There's a lot of memories, but it was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, when she was, you know, when we were kids, I really didn't get to go out anywhere. So, because my family wanted us to all just kind of stay together. And I kind of did the same thing with her. You know, I didn't really want her to be with the babysitter all the time. So, you know, she stayed with me, and we made like this little bed in the back of the restaurant.
On top of the dish towels.
On top of the dish towels, we made a little cot for you. And so
no, the cot was next to the cigarette machine.
Okay, all right, but you slept with us, you know. All right, you slept with us. So, but that's how, you know, restaurant families. I believe that's what goes on. You know, if you go to like some of these Chinese or Japanese and Korean restaurants, whatever, you see kids running around, that was me. You know, that was pretty much me, and we just needed to be around our families. And it was so cool that all our waitresses took turns to see if you were okay, you know. And at one point after the restaurant closed, I went to Zen. I says, I'm really sorry that I exposed you to all of this, and especially that loud music that we used to play. She goes, are you kidding, Mom? That was the best part of growing up. I'm going, fuck yeah, okay, good. I did okay, you know. So if anything, Atomic Café, when I was growing up, when it became the punk scene back in the 70s, I used to listen to KLOS a lot with Rodney Bingenheimer playing Midnight Punk. And that was so refreshing for me because I didn't understand disco. I didn't understand, you know, I was just so bored of all of that stuff. So if anything, that was, you know, and I'm a music major, so I grew up with a lot of musicians, period. And if anything, that kicked it off. So when these guys, the Screamers, you know, that you saw in the flick, the Screamers used to, you know, it was a word of mouth from everybody. And these kids actually got into making their own records, and they come over and say, hey, stick it in, can you, you know, just cut this record. And a lot of kids did. And I stuck it in the jukebox, and boom, it just became a hit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're already getting questions from the audience, and I think a lot of people could stay here all day just hearing stories. But I wanted to move us along a little bit in terms of the film itself now. For both of you, again, you know, why do you think it was important to make this film, and how, if at all, do you see it being relevant to J-Town, to Little Tokyo, and what's happening today? So either of you, whoever wants to go.
You want me to go? Yeah, you go. Okay. I think this, if anything, there were so many people that try to copy the Atomic Café. All right. I mean, everywhere, even in Germany, they, Fry's, electronic, they made a hot dog stand. And then at one point, for a little while on Washington Boulevard in Culver City, there was a restaurant called the Atomic Café. Oh yeah, and there was like a little punk scene that was happening out in Monrovia, and there was a coffee truck that called the Atomic Café. This is the original Atomic Café. So Tad and Akira, LTSC, thank you so much for putting the stamp on it. I was getting really tired. Oh, and next door from the Atomic Café, Brave Dog Claire says, we gotta put a stop to this. They're really effing up everything that we've done, you know, and they're just like screwing it all up. I says, yeah, okay. So we tried so many times to put like an event in Chinatown after post Atomic Café. And, you know, these were some of the things that we tried to do, but it didn't happen. But you guys did it for us. So I really appreciate it.
I think it's really great that we were able to, us as a community had was able to tell this story. And, you know, I think that's really important. And I think it's, you know, relevant to gentrification and art washing today. You know, like in the Atomic had 3 locations, and we're like constantly asked to move. And the last location, like my mom said, was the 3rd one. So like, and you could see what's happening in Little Tokyo today with all the developments and gentrification that's happening within, you know, Little Tokyo. So I think it's really great that we were able to tell our stories. Tad and Akira did a great job, especially coming from a community lens, and having it produced by our own community is really special too. So yeah, I think it's great.
It's a great segue to Tad. Maybe if you want to kick us off in terms of sharing your role in the film. And then, yeah, why did you want to be a part of this? What is special about this project to you? And then Akira, I'd like to hear the same from you after.
Yeah, I think you know, it was a big honor to be part of this project. You know, I think growing up, you know, at least in my household, it was more the legend of Atomic Nancy I actually learned about first. And my parents always talk about you know, how Atomic Nancy's voice and what an amazing singer she is. And I put, you know, 100% believe that, still believe, you know, it's one of the best voices in our community. And so for me, the Atomic Cafe was actually secondary to Atomic Nancy. So for me to even learn more about the cafe, you know, it was, I kind of always, I think within the Little Tokyo community, a lot of us know about the story, but it was really cool to actually then meet people who are part of it, and actually hear, you know, go through all the photos. So yeah, I got involved. Little Tokyo Service Center has, you know, for many years supported my work in the community, and therefore, you know, I think actually the LTSC gave probably my first commissioned video at a college, which was for the back then was called the Little Tokyo Rec Center. So there's been a long relationship, and Evelyn Yoshimura has been a huge mentor of mine, and so she was really the one that brought the idea of actually making this film and actually getting the ball rolling and starting to do interviews. So Evelyn was a huge part of getting this film started. And then that's when you know, I met Remy. Remy, maybe if you could talk more about too the kind of the reason why we wanted to tell the story in terms of what was going on in Little Tokyo, in terms of, you know, not only gentrification of physical space, but also gentrification of history and stories. But that's kind of how I got involved, and that was, yeah, like 8 years ago. So it's been a long time coming.
I'll just quickly, since Tad asked, yeah, so I was at Little Tokyo Service Center back in 2013, which, going back through the records, Tad, is when we did start this project. And I think it, you know, coming from a community development and social service organization that's rooted in the Little Tokyo community, my perspective was really about how place matters, and who has control over place and space. There'd been so many decisions made for the community, especially by various government entities for generations, right? I mean, we talk about all the waves of displacement that have happened in Little Tokyo. And in 2013, we were kind of at this nexus of the transit agency Metro wanting to build a new alignment through the neighborhood. There was a huge community campaign to influence that, to ensure the least amount of harm to the neighborhood. But nonetheless, the station site, which housed the building that was home to Atomic Café and eventually other spaces, as well as a couple other businesses, was legally taken by Metro. So the community had land taken from it, and the buildings were going to be demolished. And while the spatial piece kind of has always been an important part of my work, when change happens, I think it's so important that we are in control of our stories and that we keep our stories alive. And so that was kind of the role I think LTSC was playing, and why we got involved at that time, and why I've stayed involved even after leaving LTSC, that I feel like it's so important for the neighborhood to exert power over our own place, and then especially our own narratives. And so it's such an honor that Nancy and Zen, you know, gave us permission to be part of this with them. So thank you for that. And I will go back to moderator hat and kick it to Akira, because I definitely know your role has evolved, Akira. I think we've included you more and more in helping us get to this point. So can you talk about your role in the film? And again, why is this special to you?
Sure. So I'm also honored to, have been a part of making this project. And I didn't know this, Tad, but we actually had a very similar experience in that we had both heard about Atomic Nancy before we actually met her. And there are so many different people that kept mentioning her name, right? And it's just the name itself, Atomic Nancy, is so mysterious and intriguing, right? So I always, her myth kind of, was built up in my mind. And so Nancy, your reputation preceded you. So I felt really lucky to, just to be asked to, at first, just come in and shoot, right? So I shot, some of the interviews, and then also there was the fundraiser at the Atomic before it was demolished. So I was able to go there and shoot that event, and, just kept going along. And Tad and I continued to talk about the project. For a long time, we didn't know exactly what to do with it. And the footage had been actually passed off to 2 different editors who worked on it a little bit, but then eventually took on other jobs and just kind of left the project. So it languished for a while. And eventually, Tad and I decided that I should take a crack at editing it. So I just got deeper and deeper into the story and the world of the Atomic. And, ultimately it turned out to be a really amazing experience because I've made a lot of projects in the past, and this is really one of my favorite projects that I've ever worked on. And there's so many different elements about it that I love, including, Nancy and Zen and all the other characters and the story of the place itself, and of course the music, right? So I had a personal connection also with the music in the sense that when I was in high school, I was too young to go to the Atomic, and I also lived in Northern California, so I'd never even heard of it until I moved down here. But I was really into punk music from about the age of 13 to 17. And the way I learned about it was from the film Decline of Western Civilization, right? And so that film features a whole bunch of the bands that were actually going to the Atomic, right? Like after their shows, probably before their shows too. Including like, X and Black Flag, all these really cool groups that also in my mind were built up in, to this sort of mythical level. So once I was able to actually start editing, I got totally into my high school frame of mind. And it was like fulfilling a certain, dream of mine, I guess, to do something about that period of time with that music, but featuring Japanese Americans, right? So it was this great sort of mix and intersection of all these different elements from my own past. So yeah, that's part of the reason why I love working on this film.
That's awesome. It's so great to hear this too, because I feel like we as a group haven't talked a lot about the film now that it's out. So it's special to just hear from all of you directly. So I definitely want to open it up and make this more casual and not be the only one asking questions. Kind of on my last point, I think, we might have questions for each other. And so if anybody does, I welcome you to have a dialogue with one another and ask each other questions. And if not, I'm prepared to keep going. And we're getting lots of audience chat questions and comments and memories. Maybe I'll share some of that out a little bit later. But panelists, do you guys have any questions for each other?
Well, actually, I have a question that I want to direct towards Nancy, because there's an aspect of you, Nancy, that we just were not able to fit into this film because, you know, the film was pretty narrow in scope, right? It was supposed to focus on the cafe itself. You're the main character, but still it was supposed to focus on the cafe. So there's an aspect of your life that we didn't really get into, which is your singing. So could you tell us a little bit about like your experience in the band when you were, you know, in your later teens, and then also what you've continued to do, like in the present?
Okay, cool. Good question. So as a waitress working at the cafe, there was a group of people that used to come like after 2.
How old were you?
I was about maybe 15 or 16 at the time, and this group of JAs that used to come in, and they would take up this whole middle table, right? And they would stay for hours and hours, and then hey, you guys, we got to go. We're closing up. So, but they still didn't go. They were out in the parking lot. And you saw one of the guys, this Dan Kuramoto, who played Frisbee until like, you know, till the sun came up. And I remember the question, he says, well, we're kind of looking for a keyboard player. I'm going, oh, you know, and I collected all these instruments like keyboards, and I did drums and percussion and organ and guitar, you know. And I says, well, I play keyboards. So he says, well, why don't you come down? You know, let's see how you do. I says, okay. So it's only 3 chords. They were doing some sort of a Santana tune. I sucked at it. So, and I felt pretty shitty at that time. And so I says, well, hey, well, you know what? I'm actually, you know, my main thing is voice. So I forget what song they were doing, but I was kind of ad-libbing whatever Dan was playing on his flute, and then what Jun Kuramoto was playing on the koto. So I kind of sang those riffs, like how Ella Fitzgerald would mimic some of the trumpets and the saxophone. And they go, shit, you're in then, you know. And then later on, then Benny Yee, I adore this guy. Benny played the keyboard and was a hell of a writer. But that's how I actually started. And today, you know, unfortunately with the pandemic, I've been with the First AME Gospel Choir for the past 20 years, because my voice don't even fit in anywhere. You know, even when Hiroshima went into this kind of like a jazz thing, there was no room for me because I didn't have that kind of voice. So, but
What kind of voice?
I have, you know, and it's so nice that you put Janis Joplin at the end, you know, Piece of My Heart, because she was my idol when I was growing up. And I had like a real raspy voice and a loud one too, raspy and loud. And I didn't look like the stereotype JA for sure. So if anything, I fit in right there with the gospel girls, and they just kind of duke me in and say, okay, you're with us now. I'm going, wow. And I'm the only non-Asian woman in this. Oh, I'm sorry, non-Black. I'm sorry. Non-Black woman that's in this choir. So, you know, I just felt really honored, and I continued on, and really, that's how I started. And I keep doing that. I can't sing in the shower anymore. Neighbors get mad, but if anything, it's cool.
Great. Are there anyone else have questions for each other? I'll jump in and while you're all thinking and just share that we've got comments. We have somebody from England watching who is talking about how they spent a lot of time in LA in the 80s and 90s, and the Atomic Café is one of their treasured memories. So pretty cool. We've also heard from someone who remembers hearing about Atomic Nancy in Watsonville. So the story definitely got out of LA and made it to other parts. So many people are sharing their memories right now of the Atomic which just reinforces what we already knew of how special it was to so many different people. We're also getting a lot of folks talking about, can you please make it full length? So I'll throw that to Tad and Akira if they want to talk about that, or if there's anyone else who wants to talk about what are we going to do next. So thank you for all of you who are participating in the chat. It's really awesome to see that you're all out there, since we can't see you right now. Did any questions come up for folks that you want to ask each other?
Well, I'd like to let Zen kind of talk about full length, because that was something that was in our minds for quite a number of years. And so I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I don't want to take up too much space because this is about this film in particular, which I love so much. But yeah, I think it, the Atomic was so many things to so many people, and I think that's what makes it super special. But I have been working on a pitch for a full-length documentary about the Atomic, and through my lens. And it's been a traumatic experience writing this treatment, because it really, we're really talking about family and chaos and community and race and music, all the good things, all the bad things. Right now, I feel like in my mind, this documentary is like a 20-hour Ken Burns problem. So I'm trying to narrow it down to feature length, right? Like an hour and a half, 2 hours. But yeah, it's gonna happen soon, I promise. Yeah, it's just really nice to hear and see, and especially what Akira said, you and Tad, knowing my mom first, and then understanding the story of the Atomic. And then especially Akira, it really hit home when you were yeah, I was really into punk, but I only knew it through the lens of the the decline of Western civilization and stuff like that, which I think the Atomic's so special when it comes to punk in LA, because it was so female dominated, and so so dominated by all those punk bands from Boyle Heights, and it's just very not your typical British punk, white punk from the East Coast. So yeah, I want to talk about all those things.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm sure people are salivating about that, hearing that there is something possibly in the works, which obviously we're all excited about. So we have a question from the audience. I'm going to start bringing some of that in and some of the other questions that I have, but someone wants to know what happened to the jukebox.
It's rented.
Okay. The jukebox was actually rented. Okay. We had a jukebox guy that used to come in because people either used to kick it or whatever it may be, just couldn't get their songs on time. I mean, it was rented. We couldn't buy it. But all those records are in my possessions, and thank goodness I have them. So anytime I do an event, you'll hear those music, and it's still the original 45. Yeah.
Yeah, and Nancy has done a couple DJ sets, at least in Little Tokyo, over the last several years with those 45s. So Akira kind of brought it up with his question, but there's a lot that, right, we talked about, in interviews, that is not in the film. I just wonder if any of you, Tad, Akira, Nancy, Zen, if there's anything else about the Atomic or anything that we came across in our conversations that we haven't been able to show in this documentary, but might want to just spend a little time chatting about in terms of the Atomic?
Well, I think Akira mentioned it, but I think the one thing that I wish, well, not, I mean, that we were hoping to do that we didn't was to feature Atomic Nancy actually singing or featuring her music and her talents. So yeah, I wish we could have done that. But yeah, there's just so many stories that we knew we kind of wanted to make it this bite-sized piece so it could kind of be accessible. But yeah, there's so many pieces that we knew about, we learned about, just weren't able to put into the final piece. But I think I think I would have loved to have we're planning on filming Atomic Nancy singing and featuring more of her own music that I wish we could have done.
Thanks. Anyone else have anything that maybe didn't make it in the film?
Well, I'll just add that Nancy has so many stories, right? Which actually, like, they'll play as films in themselves, if that makes any sense. Like, she'll describe something that happened and I'm like, oh, wow, this is like a scene from a movie. And so, so there's no way that we could, include all these beautiful stories in such a short, amount of time. So I do agree that, that the canvas should be larger and something else should be made. But there's one character that also did not get, I feel like, enough mention in the film, which is Nancy, your husband. So do you want to talk just a little bit about him?
Maybe you want to chime in too, Zen. So he came from Japan, and I learned how to speak the masculine Japanese through him. But he went to USC. He was a fine arts major and minored in math and law, and he taught law in his university. But when he came back to the States, that part of his political science type of teaching didn't leave, because some of the kids that were coming from USC or the colleges, the Japanese students, they would come and eat. And then he would do like this entire lecture at the table while they're eating. And I thought, Jesus Christ, Kyoshi, they want to fucking eat. Why don't you just let them chill out? He goes, but it's really important that I really illustrate this, Go, okay. But he was a bookaholic. He would go to the bookstore. There was a bookstore on the corner of First and Central every single day and buy a new book. And then he would come back and he would be reading on the way back to the cafe. And one day I was sitting at the booth and I'm going, hey, Kyoshi, what happened? You got a big old knot on your forehead. He says, oh, I was reading the book and I hit a pole. I go, oh, okay. But he was a very interesting man, and he was a very bright man. And our first date, he gave me a math quiz. And I said, shit, I wasn't that smart. I didn't like math, but that was our first introduction. But yeah, he was so brilliant. I do miss him. It's been over 20 years and I miss him, but he was a character at the cafe. And in fact, I think I shared it with you, Akira. There was one point where a lot of people saw Blade Runner. Oh, no, it was Mad Max? No, it was the Blade Runner. And there was a Japanese scene with this old guy. And everybody said, gee, that looks like your husband, I just cracked up. So, but these kind of things, I don't know, this couldn't have happened in this short little flick, right?
Yeah. I think, my dad was like a totally different experience at the Atomic. Like you either came for my mom or you came for my dad. And I think my dad's like cronies were like the Japanese underbelly of Los Angeles, right? And like, and he was 20 years older than my mom, and he never smiled, and he just chain smoked, and like was also super hilarious. Like I remember he would like, do you remember that time, or maybe you weren't there because like you guys like you were there when he wasn't there sometimes taking care of me, but like some guy was like, some old Japanese guy was like reading probably the rafu at the counter, and my dad like set the paper on fire for some reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, he would, and like he would have like all of these like his yakuza buddies would come in, right? And like they would play that thumb game with me, and then like they would actually have no fingers either, you know. And I don't know, like I was too young to understand what was happening, but yeah, as an adult you like piece it all together and realize all the shenanigans that were happening. But
There was a lot.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say. There was a
it
lot.
was a lot.
That's another movie in itself.
Part 17.
Yep.
So kind of along those lines, we have an audience question for you, Nancy and Zen. Do you miss the Atomic Café? And if so, what do you miss about it? Because this person does, as do many people in the chat, but from your perspective.
You know what? I worked so hard. It was really hard to actually engage with the people. And maybe most of the time I was pretty inebriated, if you will. But I really didn't have time to super enjoy everything that I really wanted to. But if I was to start it again, I'll throw in the jukebox first in an empty room and see what happens, you know, and see, I don't know. It really, the people made the place.
Yeah.
And the coolest people came. And that's what I miss. It's like, I remember your face, you know, like I would never remember your name, but I remember what you ate. Like, oh, I remember Rodney Bingenheimer eating 2 eggs with French fries and toast and coffee. Pat Morita would have a bowl of Simon on the counter. And then I used to hop over their plates on the counter because there was no doorway or something to let me get through the other side. So it was a circus in itself.
Yeah. I miss certain parts of it. I wish there was a place in LA that everybody from all places could like hang out and be cool with each other, you know, like especially like artists and gangsters and musicians and people of color, and eat food and listen to music. But like I think what really went down at the Atomic would be illegal right now, right? Like I don't think it could exist to the point where like, yeah, I feel like everybody was just so free in so many ways to do whatever, you know. I remember above the cigarette machine, do you remember this? There was like this poster of like drugs, like all kinds of drugs. And it would say like these red pills. And there was like a legend. It was like, these were like, I don't know. I don't even know what the pills were. And there was like, I remember staring at like all of this like marijuana pictures. And then there was like bricks of cocaine and like, you know.
Sorry, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I remember that sort of stuff. But yeah, I miss that. I miss like going to a place and like listening to music and everybody just having a good time. And I don't think it happens much.
So we also had an audience question, since you brought up posters and things on the walls. someone who remembers all of the kind of record covers and posters and memorabilia and wants to know if you've kept any of that or what happened to it.
Okay. The jackets of the record sleeves, I have them. The posters, you know, after it shut down, after my dad got really sick, I just kind of kept it on the walls, okay? For whatever reason, I didn't take those down. And whoever took them down, or whoever took over, had to see what was it like. I don't know if that conveys why I left it, but the record jackets that were on this one pillar of every artist that brought me their music to put in, I still have them, if not covered with teriyaki sauce or whatever, you know, but I have them. Yeah.
That's amazing. And another thing you mentioned, Zen, which I've been thinking about now that the film's out, is that, yeah, there is nothing that could replace Atomic now. But kind of this connection again to what's happening in Little Tokyo, and for all the panelists, since all of you spend lots of time in Little Tokyo, are there places that are obviously not replacements for the Atomic, but are there other places that feel like those special little gems that we have in Little Tokyo right now that we want to make sure we keep?
Well, like, even, you know, I think that was a cool thing. I think, you know, one of the things, the best part about this project too, is that it's so multi-generational. And I think that's why, you know, I love working in Little Tokyo with LTSC, with my parents, with my aunties and uncles, because you can kind of, having kind of done so much stuff on the Sansei generation, you can kind of see the historical relevance of what you're going through, you know, presently. So, I mean, but unfortunately, like, if I think about it, you know, I think the closest things that we had, or my generation, was like Oiwake or Wylands, which is now closed, you know. So I think this addressing of a real issue of gentrification and loss of space, but also too, I think too, it's just every generation kind of has its own moment. And I think it makes me, doing projects like this, really make me appreciate maybe the current before it goes. So now, you know, places like the Park's Finest Barbecue or Beat Rock Music, the things that kind of I culturally have grown up with in community, having fun with music, I could kind of embrace that and kind of see the historical relevance of it in the present, instead of having to wait till it's gone, and kind of like what we're doing with, like, you know, the other places like Oiwak and Wylands, like kind of mourning their loss after the fact.
Thanks for that, Tad. And there is an audience question which I wanted to just quickly address. It's clear we have lots of folks outside of LA, which is great. And I know we're kind of talking about Little Tokyo as if everybody knows what's going on. And so there was a question around, can we quickly just frame up what's happening in Little Tokyo for those who are not in LA and are not as familiar? So I'll just quickly chime in around, you know, I talked a little bit about transit construction. So lots of transit construction impacts on Little Tokyo. And that was sort of the most direct inspiration for diving into the film, because of the station is going to be now where the building that housed Atomic used to be. And as Little Tokyo is part of the greater downtown community, I would say in the last, you know, 10 years, a really huge boom in development. For those who may have been in LA 20 plus years ago, downtown wasn't really the place you would go out or live in. And now I think it's fair to say is like the trendiest neighborhood in LA. And so we've got restaurants popping up, tons of residential development, most of which is luxury, high rise, definitely not affordable housing for the people who have historically lived in the community or adjacent. And so as a result of this like kind of pressures coinciding of private development, private investment, and then the public sector prioritizing downtown core as well, we're seeing a lot of gentrification, which I think is a national phenomenon that's not unique to LA, that urban centers, downtowns are really struggling to see what do we do? What do we do about communities who have been forced to be in that space because of so much of what we're reckoning with right now racially in terms of segregation and racial covenants and policy that has forced mainly communities of color to live in disinvested areas. And now that it's trendy to quote unquote revitalize those spaces for a more affluent population, what do we do about the history that we've created in those spaces? What do we do about the people who have been in those spaces, and how do we ensure that they are prioritized? And so we're really at a crossroads, not just in Little Tokyo, but across the bridge in Boyle Heights, in Chinatown, in most of the ethnic enclaves in Los Angeles right now, to not just save our spaces, but again, you know, tell our stories and have our voices be at the center of what happens to our neighborhoods. And unfortunately, that is a real battle that's happening. So thank you for the question. I apologize that we kind of made some assumptions that everybody's in the thick of J-Town happenings right now. And so there's a lot going on. And then obviously you add the pandemic on top of it. And we're really, you know, wanting to support our small businesses and our cultural institutions like JANM and VC right now, so that all of these important organizations and cultural spaces can survive. So thank you for the question, and hopefully that brings a little clarity. Yeah, so everyone always feel free to jump in, panelists, if there's anything, but we've got tons of questions rolling in. One of them, Nancy, is around how did you get into music? In the documentary that we briefly talk about that your parents loved music, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
Back in the day, Dad was one of the 3 restaurant places that had a jukebox, okay? And when I was maybe about 3 or 4 years old, really super young, he would bring some of these records from the Billboard magazine, whatever was on the Billboard magazine, because that's how we kind of knew what would play, right? And he would bring some of the records home, and I had a little phonograph, and I would play those records day in and day out. And that was my toy, that was my best friend, that was everything to me. And I kept playing it and playing it. And then, you know, I knew at the age of maybe 6 or 7, I was in grammar school, that I am gonna do music. Somehow, somewhere, I think I'm just gonna do music. And from grammar school to junior high, I joined all these choirs. We used to sing in the quad, you know, there was like a quartet. And we would do it during a break time or lunchtime. Then high school, joined the choir, and pretty much that's how I really actually started. And then when, before I had a driver, I couldn't drive, right? And then when they asked me to come to these rehearsals with Hiroshima, there was a cool dude named Tracy Okita that used to come over and pick me up. That's Jun Kuramoto's brother. And he says, hey, you know what? We're going to come pick you, or I'm going to come pick you up. We're going to go do Asian American study at Long Beach, and then we're going to have rehearsal. And that went on for a while. So that was my deal until I was able to get a driver's license. I think it was about 17 and a half years old when I got it. So, but music has been all around me. You know, Dad and Mom played the jukebox. You know, they played the Japanese music. There was a lot of Hawaiian music that I was exposed to. So I just really loved the way they sang. It was more auditory, if you will. I'm deaf on my left ear, but I have this acuteness on my right ear that I can hear, you know, pretty much to like perfect pitch, if you will. And that's how I learned how to, you know, really develop my whatever uniqueness of trying to sing. So, and I talk real loud because I think you can't hear me. You know, I can't hear me, and it's getting worse. So I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Nancy. The next question is kind of combining a couple. And so kind of for Akira and then maybe Zen. So from the question about the sign, the old atomic neon sign, which I believe Janum has somewhere. So a question about what is Janum, any plans to do anything with the sign? And then also related, is there going to be anything on the station site about the Atomic, kind of remembering? So I think, yeah, Akira and Zen, I don't know if you guys want to kind of tag team on that question, on those questions.
Well, as far as the sign, so I work at Janum. I'm the director of the Watase Media Arts Center. And the original sign, not the mushroom cloud. I wish we still had the mushroom cloud, but that doesn't exist anymore, I guess. But the sign that says Atomic Café is there in the permanent exhibition at Janum. So if you haven't been to Janum and you want to see the sign, go and check it out once they reopen. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but and as far as plans for it, I really honestly don't know. There is a plan to redo that permanent exhibition, and I'm hoping that, you know, the sign and the booth, because I know that they also have a booth, is a part of it. And I feel like this film, this short film, would, you know, be a perfect accompaniment to both of those things in order to give visitors some context for what they're seeing. Because otherwise, you know, they just see this really cool neon sign, but they don't know anything about the place that it was.
Yeah, that would be so cool to have the film incorporated into that exhibit. I feel like if there are plans to redo that area, I would love to help a little bit. I feel like some of the, I feel like we could decorate it a little bit more fun or something. But yeah, so Metro and Little Tokyo Service Center and my mom and I have gotten together to make a little, I guess a commemoration,
Memorabilia?
I don't know, a commemorative like wall at the metro station about the history about the Atomic. So, you know, it goes through my grandparents and then to my mom, and then what happened after the Atomic. There was the Troy Cafe in the same building, not in the same place, but in the same building. So yeah, there'll be a little bit of a hint of what was there, left behind for people to see.
Great. So we are at 3 o'clock. I know we've got more time if folks want to keep chatting. So again, if there's any questions that you all have for each other, any other kind of just general comments in terms of memories. I think that was one of the things, another thing that is coming up a lot in the chat is, where can we send our stories? And I know back when we started this, there was like, we did a Facebook page, but I'm pretty sure that's not being administered anymore because it was 7 years ago. So yeah, Zen, are you interested in hearing from people? You want to say something about that?
Yeah, I would love stories. I would love pictures. I would love anything you could remember would be fantastic. You could email me at, should I say it online? Should I say it right now? Yeah, you could email me at mail, M-A-I-L, at zensekizawa.com. It's ZENSEKIZAWA. And if you want to, if you'd rather talk to me about it too, like we can set up a phone call. Yeah, I would love it, please. It's so cool to hear all of these things.
That's awesome. I think we're getting tons of memories just shared in the chat, which we can't see necessarily, but hopefully we can save all of that as part of the recording. And then Zen can have that. And yeah, thank you for sharing your info. I think Joy from Jana maybe can put that in the chat for people to links to email Zen. And yeah, I guess maybe as a last question, and then we'll go into kind of closing remarks and wrap up. There are some questions about what are each of your reflections on Little Tokyo right now? I know we've talked about what's happening, but a number of people have asked if you could just share what do you think about Little Tokyo right now and what's going on in the neighborhood? For those who maybe aren't there, but also just to talk about why this neighborhood is still important and special to all of us. So if anyone wants to share any general thoughts.
You know, I just went by J-Town the other day, and with this pandemic, it just, in the beginning of the pandemic, it looked so desolated. It looked so bad. And I just felt so bad for the store owners and the people. And also, like, a lot of customers were really kind of disappointed of not going there because it's still a fun place to go, right? And so I went maybe last week, and now we're kind of slowly reopening it. And what's so cool that, you know, I see some of the tents and the umbrellas of outside of the shops and the eateries, you know, it looks really good. You know, they closed down First Street, so you can just kind of have a little bit more space. Like we do in Nisei Week, we close down that First Street and just have a, you know, a party, right? So I don't know, there's a very magical vortex, if you will, of J-Town, and it'll always be that way. The community is so strong, and, you know, kudos to, you know, JCCC, Little Tokyo Service Center, people that are icons for me, like Evelyn, Janum, you know, all these people that just kept it going, just like I try to keep that fire going. And, you know, we're just trying to get through it. I feel like we've all gone through this big war, and we'll get it. We'll get it on the other side. We will. I just feel that. I really do. You know, I'll be part of it until I go 6 feet under. That's just how I feel. You know, I'm a J-Town girl and always will be, right? So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's such a special, or there's such a great infrastructure in Little Tokyo that, you know, is really unique to a lot of communities. And I feel like, you know, it makes me hopeful to be able to fight everything at once all the time right now, but like, especially like gentrification. You know, our community is really strong. We don't necessarily all agree about everything, but I think we all can agree that we're trying to, that we all love Little Tokyo and we all want to preserve it. Hopefully we can all get on the same page on how to do that. And but yeah, you know, I think it's just really great to see, you know, everybody in my mom's generation still very active in Little Tokyo, and you know, everybody younger than me still very active in Little Tokyo too, and working together, and how, you know, like that intergenerational community work looks like is really beautiful. Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough time to think about. You know, I think the pre-pandemic, we were already having so many things to fight for, and now, yeah, it seems very daunting. But I do think that, like my mom said, we will get through it. We'll metamorphosize into something. I don't know what it is, but it's happening. So.
Thank you. Akira and Tad, any thoughts on that or other closing remarks before we wrap?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, like everyone says, Little Tokyo is home, right? It's where we all grew up. That's where I grew up. And I think, you know, we've all gotten so much from our community, continue to get so much from our community. And I think the older I get, the more I realize how special it is, right? To not only have a space, but have such rich history of not only in culture, but also activism for many, many generations. And I think that is reason enough to fight for it now, and to protect it, and to protect, you know, physically the space itself, but also to protect, you know, our stories, our history. And so, yeah, because I think, you know, it means so much to different people. And, you know, I'm really glad to hear, you know, that, you know, it's for both Zen and Akira to really talk about how they appreciated the process, because I think that's something that sometimes we take for granted. But you know, this project, I got to work with all of my friends, and it also came full circle. I think, you know, I think that was the first time I met Zen, was when we did the interview. But then since then, you know, we've become friends. We got to interview like Maseo in the film, and Maseo and I were like the Rugrats, the VC, visual communication Rugrats, because his mom and my parents worked there. You know, and so and then, you know, now I hope to be able to bring my kids to Little Tokyo, and they can grow up with my friends' kids, and kind of, you know, continue this important just community that we all have put so much work into and have benefited from. So I think this was, yeah, really, you know, great opportunity for me just to continue being a part of that community.
So I think, well, I am the only outsider that's a part of this group, because I grew up in Northern California, and I've only known Little Tokyo since 1994. But I've spent a lot of time there because I've worked at JANM for such a long time. And I've definitely seen, you know, the fluctuations happening. In 94, when I first moved to LA, honestly, I felt like it was kind of dead. Like there really wasn't that much happening. And there was no museum at that time. There were two restaurants, Suhiro's and Rascals. You guys remember Rascals? Those are the two spots that I would go to with my friends. So, you know, it's the activity has kind of, you know, gone in waves, I think. But, you know, like you guys have said, we're really lucky to have these cultural institutions that are anchoring the space, right? Because you already mentioned JANM and JCCC and LTSC, but we also have visual communications based in Little Tokyo and East-West Players. But visual communications, I think that they were very intentional in putting this program together for us to be able to talk about Little Tokyo and, you know, its importance and its place in LA history. So I just want to give a shout out to VC, Visual Communications, for, you know, for organizing this, and also, you know, premiering our film and being so supportive.
Thank you. Yeah, echoing all of that. And I hope everybody out there has enjoyed this kind of behind the scenes moment with Nancy and Zen and our incredible directors, Tad and Akira. And I hope that you'll continue to spread the word about our film. It's still up for a while on the Film Festival website. A recording of this panel will also be posted, and I believe we'll have subtitles when it does go up, so you can share this discussion as well. And again, please do continue to support the Little Tokyo neighborhood, all of the organizations we've mentioned. I believe links are in the chat or in the description for this panel. There's lots of ways that you can support and be a part of all the incredible work happening. So with that, I think we'll close, and thank you all panelists again. Thank you, Joy, who's behind the scenes on all the logistics for this streaming. And yeah, hopefully we'll all get to see each other in person sometime soon. Take care. Bye, guys.
It was like on a Saturday night. Place is packed. After all like the Chinatown scene with the Madame Wong's and Hong Kong Café, the Mask, all these places, they just like closed their clubs. It was like, whew, come go to Atomic Café. As soon as the doors open, I could see X waiting for their table. They were right near the jukebox. At that time, Jerry Brown was dating Linda Ronstadt. And there was a window right behind them, and I see Andy Warhol kind of looking in. I see Sid Vicious with his entourage ordering like, I don't know how many different kinds of fried rice, and I see the fried rice being like thrown like we had a food fight. The middle table, either the Go-Go's were there or Devo was there. So there was a couple times where I had to chase a customer because they did a dine and dash. But when I went out, it looked like a freaking concert outside. We were the noisiest corner in J-Town.